Edward Chen stared at the credit transfer confirmation on his neural interface. 50,000 credits. Gone. The marriage broker's algorithm had matched him with subject 7734J, a woman from the outer colonies with a 97.3% compatibility rating in domestic management, resource optimization, and emotional stability. He didn't need love. He needed efficiency. At 42, Edward had built his reputation as Terra's leading atmospheric engineer, but his apartment looked like a disaster zone, and he'd eaten synthesized protein bars for dinner 6 nights straight. The Mars terraforming contract demanded his full attention, and he couldn't afford distractions. The door chimed at 0800 hours exactly. Edward appreciated punctuality. He opened it to find a woman of average height, her skin bearing the faint blue-gray undertone common to Titan's underground settlements. Her hair was an unusual silver white, cut practically short. She carried a single duffel bag. Edward Chen? Her voice held an accent he couldn't quite place. Yes. Your 7734J? Jenny Vross. She smiled, and something about it seemed slightly off, too wide, lasting a fraction too long. May I enter? Edward stepped aside. Of course. The broker sent your file. Former resource manager on Titan Station 6. Excellent efficiency ratings. No criminal record. Medical clearance approved. All accurate. Jenny set her bag down and immediately began examining the apartment with systematic precision, touching walls, studying the ventilation grates, even sniffing the air. Interesting atmospheric composition. You keep oxygen at 23.7%? Edward blinked. Most people wouldn't notice a 2% variance. For cognitive performance, you can detect that? I'm observant. That smile again, lingering half a second too long. Over the next week, Edward discovered that Jenny was indeed practical. She reorganized his kitchen using 3-dimensional optimization algorithms that he, an engineer, hadn't considered. She reprogrammed his environmental controls to save 14% on energy costs. She even debugged a calculation error in his Mars atmospheric models that would have delayed the project by months. But there were oddities. She never ate when he was watching. Her movements were fluid, but occasionally too precise, like a rehearsed dance. And once, he'd entered the kitchen at night to find her standing perfectly still in the darkness, eyes reflecting the ambient light like a cat's. Couldn't sleep? He'd asked. She'd turned, that smile appearing instantly. Just thinking. Your species, humans, spend so much time sleeping. It's fascinating. Your species. Edward had noted the phrase but dismissed it as a linguistic quirk from the outer colonies. The burnt cookies happened on their 10th day together. Jenny had insisted on baking from scratch, claiming it would be an interesting chemical experiment. Edward had been skeptical but allowed it. He was deep in calculations when the smoke alarm shrieked. He rushed to the kitchen to find Jenny staring at a tray of charcoal lumps, her expression utterly bewildered. The thermodynamics were mathematically sound, she said, poking one black disk. I calculated the Maillard reaction rates, accounted for convection variables, optimized for 178.3 degrees Celsius. Did you preheat the oven? Preheat? She tilted her head at an angle that was definitely not human normal. You must heat the heating element before heating? Edward couldn't help it. He laughed. A real laugh, the first in months. Yes, Jenny, that's how ovens work. She looked at him with something like wonder. You're amused by my failure? I'm amused by the idea of someone calculating Maillard reactions who doesn't know about preheating. Jenny's too wide smile returned, but this time it reached her eyes. Eyes that were, he now noticed, violet in certain light. On Titan, we didn't have ovens. We didn't have much fresh food at all. I wanted to try to be more human. The words hung in the air. Edward set down his tablet. Jenny, what are you? She was silent for a long moment, her fingers drumming a pattern that was definitely not random. It looked like a mathematical sequence. Finally, she sighed. I'm a Valari. We're observers, researchers. My people have been studying humanity for 70 years, trying to understand how you survived your own mistakes, how you reached the stars despite your inefficiency and chaos. Edward should have been terrified. Instead, he felt oddly calm. The marriage broker? I manipulated the algorithm. I wanted to observe human domestic partnership up close, to understand why you pair bond, why you sacrifice efficiency for companionship. She looked at the burnt cookies. I've learned more in 10 days than in 3 years of external observation. Like what? That humans laugh at failure, that imperfection isn't just tolerated but cherished. That Edward Chen, who optimizes everything, keeps his grandmother's antique clock even though it loses 2 minutes daily. She picked up a burnt cookie, examining it. That cookies taste better when they're slightly imperfect because the variation creates complexity. Edward picked up a cookie and bit into it. It tasted like charcoal. He smiled anyway. This is terrible. Jenny's laugh was musical and completely genuine. I know. Isn't it wonderful? Edward looked at this alien woman who had infiltrated his life through a marriage broker's algorithm, who reorganized his kitchen and debugged his code, who was terrible at baking and brilliant at almost everything else. The contract was for 1 year, he said slowly. What happens after? Jenny's expression became serious. I'm supposed to file my report and return to the observation ship. The Valari Council will use my data to determine if humanity is worth a formal diplomatic relationship. And what will you tell them? She looked at the burnt cookies, at Edward's amused expression, at the messy apartment that was slowly becoming a home. That humans are wildly inefficient, emotionally chaotic, and completely fascinating. That they make their observers want to stay and burn more cookies. Edward held out his hand. Then let's burn some more. For science. Jenny took his hand, her 3-fingered grip firm and warm. For science, she agreed, and perhaps for other reasons too. Outside, in the orbital space beyond Mars, a Valari observation ship waited. But in a small apartment on Terra, an engineer and an alien learned the most important lesson of all, that the best equations are the ones that factor in burnt cookies and unexpected laughter. The end.